Hey, what's up guys? Let's jump straight into it. This project is called Baby Girl. Baby Girl is a tool to discover available web domains with the associated cost. You can easily come up with an idea for a name of a project or a company. You like it, you're invested emotionally. You then search for the domain and realize that it costs you 100k/unavailable. So to relieve the emotional stress, let's reverse engineer it. Build a script to first scrape the name and second to check the price. So the first part of the script, from a given list of URLs, scrape names, build the URLs, append metadata, and dump to a MongoDB database collection. Second is then obviously to load from the database and to price. So let's get straight into it. We're going to need some web scraping library imports. And also some drivers to be able to control the scraping process. I like Selenium, so import WebDriver from Selenium, or rather from Selenium import WebDriver, and then some kind of mechanism to tell the driver to wait to load. You might want to do this if your internet isn't super quick. Sometimes your machine can be running many different processes, and it just takes time to load a screen. The last thing you want is your code to just jump ahead, execute before the screen's loaded. You're never going to be able to scrape the fields that you want to if that's the case. Talking about scraping, Beautiful Soup, I think it's widely known as one of the best, so I use it. I found this website, verywellfamily.com, top 1,000 baby names in the US. I don't really care about US baby names, but there are 1,000 on there, so for the amount of effort it takes to build the script, this probably has the most names from the URLs that I searched. Whatever. So in the background you've got this Wiz Khalifa Big Pimpin' full mixtape. I've liked Big Wiz Khalifa for a while, not really heard any new stuff that has taken my fancy over the past couple years. This new album, or rather mixtape, is dope. So we want a function to initialize the WebDriver. Why do we want to do that? You can just call the function directly from the WebDriver library, but I like to wrap it up in a function. It's just easier to think about, it's easier to manage, it's easier to store the executable path, which is where the WebDriver execution function file, whatever you call it, is saved. For me, it's just here in the downloads because I'm too lazy to move it anywhere else. Stop looking at my download history, please. But there it is, Chrome driver. You just add the path, and yes, that's really it. You don't need to think about it again. So the next thing I'd do is test the driver function. Just have it really. I think it's a good habit to have. If anything, it wastes a little bit of time, but whatever. It was 10 p.m. on Friday. I had time to waste. How are you going to initialize this script? I used to just execute file in the console. It's quite messy, and what I found is that for longer running scripts, it just basically kills your work because you can't really work on something else. What is common practice is to obviously include the global name variable, check if the variable is set to main, which it is if it's run from the command line or the command prompt, and basically get whatever you want to run from the script to run, given that global variable. So if we're going to initialize a driver, it's a good idea to kill the driver as well. Sometimes you want some kind of confirmation that it has closed. If you're running it, if you're going to be there when running it, you can tell by the fact that the screen disappears. However, that's not always ideal. That won't even tell you all the time. So you sometimes do want an error to be thrown in order to keep a log, and that log can be looked at any point in time. I'd say that's better code, but this really isn't about that. This particular project wasn't particularly difficult. I just wanted to get it working, so yeah. So what I want to run when initializing the script is to open the driver, to load the page that I have fed to it, the URL, to get the driver to wait, and then to kill the driver. So let's see how that runs. Obviously that won't run. So in the top right of the screen you can see Friday 18th of September 2209. At the time I'm recording this voiceover, it's Saturday 19th and it's 12:26. I had no plans to make this video to record over it, but screw it. Life's about doing new things. It's about challenging yourself. Someone said I should talk over the news as well, so I'm like, you know what? Let's get it. So after struggling with paths, we can finally arrive to running the script, I hope. No, or not. I've never actually watched myself back when coding. I don't have a coding background. I taught myself, as many of you have, or haven't, I don't know. And I think one of the problems with doing that, there are many pros of doing that. One of the cons of doing that is fear of the unknowns. Like, am I missing something? Am I missing some key knowledge that someone who had studied it has? And it can cause a lack of confidence, especially at the beginning of the journey. I had that. However, I personally like the text approach of just get it working and then figure out what you can improve. And that suited me quite well mentally as well as in practice. So each their own. So I think this will work now. No, it still won't work. One of the really annoying things about the command line is a multiple version of Python on Mac. I hate this aspect of it. It's really annoying. Like I wish it could just be simple, and it probably is for some people. I just haven't spent the time to figure out how to make it simple. Virtual environments, I know people use those. One day I'll learn about it, but I don't use it enough to tackle it right now, although after last night I probably will at some point. I definitely do not want to be Googling this again. So what I think I realized is that the path was just screwed up. Like apostrophes and speech marks, there's a difference between them apparently. At least it's interpreted a bit differently in this WebDriver.chrome function method. So I rerun it and let's see. Yeah, that would do it. Spelling mistake. So it opened and it closed straight away. There's a problem with this WebDriver wait thing. I know there's a sleep function somewhere, but I couldn't remember where it was. It wasn't a method from the driver. I mean, I soon found out it was from the time import. So once looking at that, I was able to do what I wanted, really. Functionality-wise, is that even a word? This is not really a tutorial. It's kind of just a walkthrough, but one of the things that I've found has been massively beneficial for my coding experience and my coding learning progress was a good keyboard, like a solid keyboard. I don't use it. I'm hooked up to the Mac at the moment, but I don't use the Mac keyboard for coding. It just doesn't feel good. I don't feel like I'm efficient with my code, with my typing rather. Just invest in a good keyboard. I'm a bit of a chancer. I found this Corsair keyboard, Cherry Switcher, £100 keyboard. I found it in someone else's trash. Don't ask what I was doing there, but freaking bargain. Cleaned it, took every key off, cleaned it, put it back together. Works, every button works. I'm just blown away at what I found. I'm very lucky. But anyway, time.sleep, there you go, 5 seconds of sleep, and it will work. See, this is the problem when you have no way to control the driver after the script loses control of it. You cannot close it, like it just leaves a load of windows open and it's just messy. It adds processes to your machine. It's inefficient, it's ugly, it's the worst thing in the world. That's not the worst thing in the world, but just drop my microphone. Just don't do it. So the actual scraping aspect can be started now that we have a driver that will navigate to the page and wait for us. This is pretty standard stuff, not particularly difficult. I don't really know any JavaScript, but the functionality of xpaths is very useful. I like to locate elements by xpath. It's just so much easier. It works for me. There are many ways to do it, but it works for me most of the time. And yeah, right click, copy xpath, chuck it in the script, wrap it in a function, and simple as that, really. It's not clear. I'm not really sure what the patterns are when retrieving the text from these kind of xpath searches, but it doesn't really matter. You can just check it. You can just call the .text method, see what it pulls up, and chop it up from there. Really, I think that's a very efficient way of doing things. You don't need to worry too much. So yeah, create any function, scrape, takes an input as a driver. Define the xpath. Use the find elements method. You have to define what kind of on what type of path will it search, and you have to define it as xpath. Actually, I don't really know what the other types are. I haven't really looked into that in a while, but there you go. So return the driver output on this find element method. So you can then chuck it into the global section. I don't even know what this is called, but at this point, because I'm so uncertain of what the output's going to be like and what I'm going to need to do to make it clean, to clean up the data, I will ditch the name equals main business and run it in console again, back to my ways. You don't need to do this if you don't want to. I find it quick for me because I'm used to it. That's really it. So same thing really. Initialize the driver, navigate to the URL, scrape once you're at the URL, and just have a look at the results.
Do you feel like there's enough people talking about the movement, like in the election? That's pretty good.
So there we go, we get a list. Pretty easy to navigate to the elements. Call the text, and there you go. Some names. Happy days, it's a start. It's you're basically done. It's just some formatting you need to do. Figure out how to separate this string into a list of names. I use the split function. There's rsplit as well. I don't know what rsplit does. Split seems to work for me. This obviously doesn't work because I've got the slash the wrong way around. Freaking obvious watching it now, but at the time I was like, what the hell? I try it again. Obviously not going to work. Realize pretty quick that's a slash. Try that with an R in front of it. Did not work. Go on, one more. So I guess this is a bit of a lack of confidence in just trying. Tried 3 times. I think if I tried a 4th time, I would have got it. It doesn't harm Googling. It didn't take me that much time. I quickly saw that there was nothing that I was doing incorrect. I just had the wrong delimiter. So run it one more time, and there you go.
You don't be bringing me problems, you bring a bitch. Peel her purse back and break her quick. They fall off if they can't commit. Real player shit. Drop the top, hit a switch.
So we'll just rename these variables just to make them more intuitive. It's a good habit to get into. So where we're at now, we have a list of names. The next thing we need in order to be able to check the price of these names is to build a URL. I'm only really checking the extensions .com and .ai. Those are the ones that are of interest to me, but obviously it's replaceable with anything you like. So we'll build a function to take a list, to append the extension, and just to return the final result. So let's go and take a quick recap on the notes that we made. So we've managed to scrape names. We're in the process of building a URL, but the problem is how exactly do you want to structure the loops or rather the output from this URL function? My thought process was dictionaries. Do we want for each name, do we want to have a sub-dictionary for each extension? In that case, we'll have nested dictionaries. That was one approach. The alternative would be for each extension a nested dictionary of names. Both cases, nested dictionaries. The difference between the two is how the loop will be made, but the complexity, I believe, will be the same. So it's just a matter of a preference over order of dictionary keys when recalling and trying to access certain values. There is an alternative, which is just a flat dictionary, and one of the big considerations I probably wouldn't have done when I started out coding was to consider how I'm going to store the data. I quite like to use mongoDB. It's pretty easy to use and it's pretty quick. So I prefer a flatter structure in mongoDB. It's just I guess it's a bit simpler and easier. So I'm just double checking the writing structure to mongoDB. There are two functions, insert and insert many. And the way that you would write documents to Mongo would be to simply throw a dictionary at it and use the .insert method. For a single dictionary, that will work, but for multiple dictionaries, you need a list of dictionaries and use the insert many method. Pretty simple. I'm not really going to explain it, but you can Google it if you want. The alternative is just a flat, as of course a flat dictionary, site, domain, and price. I think that's what I went for in the end anyway. So, for example, Olivia.com would have its own entry. Olivia.ai will have a separate entry.
Man, my bro just made $1 million. Now we all can take care of our children. Bad senorita, she do what I tell her. Kush, yelling, car, selling. New bitch bad
It's interesting, just going over, rewatching my thought process here.
oversell it. You ain't got no hoes like you been rocking home repellent. What's my next move? There ain't
I don't think I would have done this
roll a big joint to go with
in the past, but it's definitely something that can save a lot of time if you do think about it before building. There are a couple thoughts of building stuff. There's like the build first and break things approach, where you just you try and then you adapt iteratively based on what feels difficult and what is easy to do. And the other one is to plan. The other approach is to plan and come up with a thought out structure to implement. Previously I'd be in the first camp, but for this particular example I took the time to think about it and to write a little bit about it, at least to write my thoughts out in this little note document.
all these hundreds on the table, it ain't fair. And you don't know your way around my block, you not from around here. Your main bitch, I gotta choose her. And we up to the morning cause we used to. Yeah. Out all night, we ain't coming yet. Play it too far, ain't no service yet. Two turned up, they don't let us book our cars in here. Started regular, now we stars. Says you wanna be a part of it. Every day I go my hardest. Don't get out of line, I'll play my part. Nigga play it smart.
Cool, so we know in advance that there will either be a price or not, and if there is no price, then it means the website is unavailable. I know from experience that searching this website, it will explicitly tell you whether a domain is available or not. And then the question is, if it is not available, do we still want to store a price? Do we still want to store that information, or should we just omit the domain? There's implicit information when it's omitted. So just quick pros and cons analysis. If we do enter a price, regardless of whether the site is available or not, then the pros are that we can explicitly check in the future. I think what I missed out here is that you'll know if you've already checked it. So you can at a later date, if for example you added to this database of names, and another name, the derivative of another name was a domain that's already been checked, then at least by storing some kind of entry for that domain, then it would save a lot of time, because you wouldn't need to research, not research, research. The cons obviously is that you can already implicitly get to the fact that there is no availability for that domain. Yeah, and of course, if there is an entry for that particular domain, even if it's unavailable, you can store metadata. Things like Google search volumes, or popularity score, some kind of score that measures popularity of the name, search trends, etc. I don't know, maybe you want to scrape social media accounts for those containing that name as a measure of popularity. I don't know, whatever you like. Of course, if we don't store the unavailable domains, then the database will be smaller. For this particular size, 1,000 plus 2 domains is 2,000 entries max. I don't think it matters. And the cons is that you can't store you wouldn't be able to store any metadata. So in the end, I just went for the flat domain price approach. So let's build the function out. Inputs, list of names, and the extension list. Pretty straightforward. We're going to choose to iterate over the extension list first in the for loop, and run a list comprehension for the actual building of the result. Looking back at it now, you could definitely use a nested list comprehension. I didn't in this case. You can see the thought process of how I'm building it. So I first look to create a string using the dot format functionality to join the name and extension, iterating over the names for all names in the name list using a list comprehension, and simply extending the domain list that has been created as an empty variable outside of the loop. this isn't really the most Pythonic way, you know, initializing an empty variable and then adding to it. However, it does work. So I don't have training or a formal education in computer science. And unlike most people, you just build what you can. You learn what you need to do. You learn what you need to learn for building purposes to get the job done. So, I mean, if it works, it works, and you slowly iterate to better standards of quality over time. I obviously changed from a list comprehension to a dictionary comprehension. Is that even the right terminology for it, or is a list comprehension in the dictionary format? So that we can save a dictionary for each domain. That will be the domain, and we include the name as a key in this dictionary. And after iterating for the domains, the domain extensions, we can just return the final list of dictionaries. And let's see what we get. So if we run the scrape function with the output of the scrape function, throw it inside the build URL function, and see the result. Yeah, a small name change. What we're really doing here is building the document form for the Mongo database entry. So I've just renamed it. So build document is not defined. Obviously, I haven't run it. Bit dumb. And as I run it, I see an issue. Pretty easy to spot. My code is full of errors, and I just rely on the error catcher in running it in the console, in running the code in the console. I don't know. Maybe that's normal. Maybe it's not. It works for me. If anything I've learned from learning to code is that it's just an iterative process. And what we see there is the result. You know, you have a domain, except what we expected was a string value for the key. However, you know, our scrape function did not return what we expected. You know, it's a small change, and there we go. What happened was that I hadn't rerun the scrape code. Having done that, we clearly get the result we want. What's left now is to write this list of dictionaries to the Mongo database. So what we would do here is, you know, create a Mongo database if it has not been created already. Create a collection and add to the collection. The hierarchy of Mongo database or mongoDB is as I type, importing PyMongo. So the hierarchy of Mongo database is to create a database. Within a database, you can create several collections. For each collection, you can insert documents. You know, a document is a collection of data, not in a tabular form, not in an SQL sort of form, but in an unstructured, almost dictionary-like form. And the beauty about Mongo database is that you do not need to have uniform fields, the same fields for every document in a collection. So why is that useful? It just provides flexibility. You know, if you're storing it in a tabular form, you'd have to include a value for every column for each row. And if that value does not exist, or if that column variable is not is not applicable to that row, then you'd fill it with an NA or a none or something like that. You would just avoid that totally with Mongo database. It's pretty cool and it's pretty fun. So the way to control Mongo in Python is to use PyMongo. You set up a Mongo client locally. You could set it up on the cloud if you have that address. It's simply a matter of entering the string address of your database. From the client, I'm creating a database called babygirl, and give back that database so instead I just do some work outside of the function just to really see what's going on here. I mean, this is one way to use the console. It's sort of like using the Python notebook, IPython Jupyter Notebook. You know, you can just run things in each cell. When I say run things, I mean run bits of code, short segments of code that you can check whether they work or not. You know, it's pretty useful, and once it does work, you can sort of checkpoint the code previously and continue to build. What we can see here is that there are no collections within the babygirl database, which is as expected. No collection is made until we add to, unless we create it, really. And even after defining these variables, right, I'm about to define a collection called girls. So if we run this and see what's happening with this collection, we can see, you know, the method is available to insert many. You know, if you run this code, collection equals db girls, and you don't add anything to it, if you then check the databases associated with your client, babygirl will be there, but girls will not be there, and that's because nothing really is created until you add to it. Pretty simple call. Insert many names. It will quickly check the count of the collection now, and we see that it's 2,000, which makes sense because we had 1,000 names. We had 2 domains, 2 domain extensions. Quick maths. So if we can wrap this now in a function, we know it works. Pretty simple. We can make it. We can make it generalize by including the 2 variables that are variable, which is the database name and the collection. The last thing we need is the list of documents to insert. So documents here will be a list, and if I can type documents, then it'd be great. But there we go. I think there, you know, I just prefer to refer to it as the name. I'm going to change that for database as well. So we can now write Mongo. just going back to the notes, we can update the particular task we've done. I quite like doing this, you know, it kind of, it makes you feel like you're making progress. I mean, you are making progress, but the additional ticking off of boxes is a psychological trick that I love. It pushes me to continue. It gives me a sense of progress in the project, a visual sense of progress. Obviously, you can see code being written, you can see it in the number of lines you're writing, but associating progress with particular tasks being completed is a big win psychologically. So there's one more thing that comes up here, is that if an extension has already been checked, do we want to add it to the Mongo database? That's not really the purpose of this project, really. Like, it's just a little bit of extra code to correct. So now we can actually move on to part 2, which is the price checking aspect. The purpose of part 1 was not to be able to produce an output to search part 2, but to have independent, sort of independent processes. You know, one process which will scrape, then save names in a way that you can use multiple website sources, URL lists, and yeah, you know, just have a single process that will maintain a database of names and build URLs from those, build domains from those names. Having an independent price check, it means you can run the scraper as and when, not necessarily joining the processes together. Previously, you know, when starting out, I'd probably have linked the two processes together and not written to Mongo database until after I've checked the price. You know, it would be a single write with the price and availability to Mongo, and it'd be something that you just pull up and call. I think this way is better. Anytime you want to sort of parallelize the process of the system you're making, is a great thing for scale. Here it doesn't really matter, you know, 2,000 domains, but if you wanted to scale a project like this, you'd almost certainly be looking to separate or segment parts of code that you can run independently. I think that's just good practice anyway. If you have intentions to run on different servers, or run code on different GPUs, or run code in batches, then having independent parts of the code really helps with that. So now moving on to part 2. I'm going to use uk.godaddy.com. As you can tell, I'm British, I'm from London. I'm in London right now, searching for a domain. This is really the biggest company out there for us. I'm not associated with them at all. I just use them personally as a domain provider, really. I've not actually used their website as a marketing package. So we would like to load from Mongo now that we've written to Mongo. Loading from Mongo is pretty easy. PyMongo makes it very, very simple to interact with the Mongo database. .find is so powerful. It returns an object that you can iterate in order to actually see the values, which is just more efficient than just returning values. So we can check this. By iterating or looping through boom. Mongo associates an object ID key with every single entry. It's just a way to be able to identify unique entries, or unique documents rather, in a collection. And also to index. If you want to amend, which we kind of do want to, we want to add to existing documents, we can refer to them by their ID. So we use the load Mongo function to return an object. That object we can iterate over in order to extract the domain and name information that we saved in part 1. Again, mental win, done. We almost have to do the same process here. We have a URL. We want to initialize a driver. We want to navigate to the page. We want to identify parts of the page that are interesting for us. We want to then extract that information from the page into a variable. We want to append that variable, or rather just add the data from what we're collecting to the Mongo database, and then we're done. So we can play around with the website, have a look at the search criteria. There are a couple of ways to do this. If you cannot find a kind of a unique way to search using the URL, which a lot of websites do let you do, then you will be able to, or you probably have to locate the search box, and once you locate the search box, you'll be able to locate the search button and search that way. It's much easier to try and find a pattern in the URLs, because a lot of websites use URLs as, or rather a lot of websites query their own database using parameters defined in the hyperlink. So given what you enter into these boxes, and the URL will be filled, and the next page on their side will pass that URL for relevant information and query, and give you back the results as a page. You can kind of bypass the whole searching in the search box aspect by manipulating the URL. It's not particularly difficult, it's not particularly advanced, it's just, it is what it is. Here I'm having a look at the alternative websites and see what happens if you hit buttons. It's always a good idea to play around with what you what you can do on the website. There are many ways. There are often many ways to skin the cat to get the information that you want. Here, obviously that information is clearly shown at the top of the page. You know, a couple of bits that stand out as interesting is GoDaddy.com explicitly tell you that a website is available, and they also give a price. And the fact that it gives a price suggests that it's available. You don't need both fields. One is sufficient, which is the price. The corollary of that is, if there is no price, then a website is not available. I run with that assumption because it's easier. In that case, you know, if you make an assumption like that, be prepared to, or rather look out for errors. Some good things to make sure that you know how to do is to error handle, really, like to catch, the ability to catch and identify quickly where errors are. This is again the sort of second field of thought and psychology of coding, is that if you are just going to go for it without planning, then you need to be able to interpret, fix, debug very well. That often is the majority of my work when building any system or writing any code. I'm quite an impatient person in this sense, so I prefer not to plan, and I like to have a quick set of notes and not overthink how I'm going to build functions and how I'm going to handle errors, and just use a try exception functionality, really, or like the approach to coding. Obviously the alternative is to really plan each part of the code, sort of second guess where errors could be. Obviously, yeah, tea break right now. The time then was Friday. It was 11:01, which is a pretty bold tea break. Really showing my nationality here. But again, who doesn't love tea at any time of the day? You gotta keep it interesting. Many of you are a fan of Lex Fridman, and I've recently watched his video on daily routine, having 2 sessions of 4 hours of deep work. I'm a big fan. 4 hours though, I mean, it takes some time to get used to that, and 1 hour of this was enough for me for now. Took a quick tea break, whatever, came back, get back to it. As you've probably seen so far, if you're still with me in this video, there are a lot of breaks, you know, slow parts of code when I'm not really typing. I've chosen to keep that in the video because it's real life. I see many videos that are sped up, or, you know, 20-minute video in building a project, and that's not realistic at all. At least for me anyway. I actually used to look at that and feel inadequate, or rather feel not as good as a coder, because I can't do projects in as short time as these people on YouTube. What I didn't realize, or what maybe it wasn't portrayed, was how long, you know, things take. Whether that's just thinking about how to build your function, whether that's error handling, whether that is rewriting certain parts of the code, it doesn't matter. Like, it does take time, and I'm not trying to give any false illusion of how long things take. I think if the goal of these videos is to inspire and is to show that projects can be fun, then I'd rather keep them as they are and not really edit and speed up and cut out parts. It's personal preference. I mean, yeah, I risk showing how slow I am at certain parts, but I have no problem doing that. And if you guys want to comment on which parts I could do more quickly, or which parts could be written better in terms of code, then I take that positively, and I will look into your suggestions. I think a lot of people ask me, firstly, I'm by no means a coder. Like, I know how to code to do the things that I want to do, and that's really it. So outside of doing the things that I want, I don't really know. But I think with any coding, whether it's languages or particular coding frameworks, algorithms, search algorithms, whatever, all you really need to do is to have a learning capacity and patience in order to pick up the things that you need. I don't really think there's any more efficient way of learning. You know, to have a project, to have some pressure on you, and then to learn whatever you need to learn to deliver. It's contra to the traditional do this course and learn this way of coding. You know, do a load of exercises and then you're ready. But in reality, you're not ready, because every project is different. There are multiple ways to skin the cat, multiple ways of building the code. It's more important to get something working than to get something perfectly written. At least in industry, you'll find that. And regardless, you know, the best thing you can do is just to write your code that works and put it out there, and take the criticism, like, hopefully constructive. You can't really take anything to heart if it works, you know, like, the fact that it works is good enough. If it takes too long, if it doesn't scale, those are minor things that you can improve on in an iterative fashion. So, back to the video. I've built this getPrice function, which sort of wraps up everything that we've done in part 2. Build the URL, navigate to the URL, give the driver some time to load. I've located the XPath of the bit of information that I'm interested in, defined element as the element XPath information, and let's see what we get. Okay, perfect. So on a page that does not have a price, the output is an empty list. So the problem here is that even for a website domain that has a price, I'm still receiving an empty list. So what I'll do is have a look at the rest of the information on the page, play around with it. It doesn't take long. See what we find. Okay, so what we can see from here is that we've identified this table. That, once we query, using the xpath gives us a full list of prices for the entire set of alternate domains that are available. This might be useful if you want to have a look at the recommendations that they make for alternate domains. It's not actually that useful for us. However, let's see what happens. So in these pauses, what I'm doing is thinking, looking out the window, eating, drinking tea. I just moved to another part of London. The apartment's pretty empty. However, there is a balcony and the river outside. So occasionally I'll get up, go have a look what's going on. It's pretty late that night, so occasionally there are some boats that go past to a cement factory. It's always a nice sight to see. So the thing I realized here was that the price that they give on the first page is not necessarily the price for the actual domain. Often they give a 2-year price with a discounted first year, and then they do that for some accounts, for some domains, and not for other domains. So the problem there is that you don't really have a single price to compare across multiple domains, which is a bit of an issue. I think that's probably something that would need to be worked on, because 99p for a domain for 1 year is not reflective of the actual cost of the domain. So I thought maybe I'll have a look at some other alternatives to GoDaddy. I didn't realize Google had a domain buying page. They kind of have everything, man. It's quite scary. But here is a bit easier. You can have a look at the annual price which is amazing. So if we add to cart and actually go to the cart to see how much it costs, there's no added cost. It kind of just is what it is, which is great. That said, the question is whether Google Domains is cheaper than GoDaddy. If it's cheaper, then I definitely want to switch to using Google Domains. Just exploring the page here, really. Going back to GoDaddy.com. And searching the same domain, we see that it's actually cheaper on GoDaddy. That made it a bit easier for me. You know, what is the point of this analysis if the price that you get is not the cheapest? Probably something you could also do is a double check. You know, check on both platforms and take the minimum of the two. That is, you know, that will be double as much computational time. It's another website. Potentially it'd be more, depending on how many steps it takes to navigate to get to a price on Google Domains, which doesn't look too many. But for this project, I didn't really care about that. I just wanted to get something working first. Also, the point of this video, the second point of this video, apart from being a realistic view on how long it takes to do a project and how long it takes to build something from zero, is to use it as motivation to code yourself. If you have a particular project you're working on right now, then you can put this on in the background. I always like to have something on, whether it's music or an interview, a Joe Rogan podcast or a Lex Fridman podcast, or sometimes even just someone else coding. You know, it gives me a bit more motivation to continue doing what I'm doing. It's almost like I'm working with someone else. That added little bit of accountability definitely helps me. I would also recommend recording your sessions. If anything, that's a better framework for accountability, because anything you do on your computer is recorded. So I decide to go back to chasing the initial xpath of the desired information. Bingo. So having changed the xpath and running the get price function, we can see that we return an object that once we query its text, we get exactly what we want. You know, it's a string format. It has characters we don't like, pound sign and comma, but that's exactly what we want. Those are just sort of minor details that we can correct, or rather we can strip out. But by and large, like, we've got that sorted and in the bag. The assumption I'm making here is that if there is no price, then it's not available. That could be wrong if the price is in another field, or the xpath is incorrect for that particular domain. But I make that assumption here. I guess that's something, that's an extension of the project. One more time, like, what I really wanted to do is just to get something working. Okay, great. So I've just tried it for a website that's taken. The error message stale element reference element is not attached to the page document. You can't find that element, so I kind of take that as the answer I want. So what we do here, again, is try except. I'm a big fan of this approach to coding. The alternative is to use if statements and a condition. I always find that you can miss conditions, or if you rush things, or you have to think a little bit more about the logic. And sometimes that's necessary. However, in this case, we have a binary situation where it either works or it doesn't, and I have a conclusion to make if it doesn't work, and that conclusion, or rather assumption, is that there is no price. So what I would like to do here is define the result as something that we like, and since we are going to store information on a domain, even if it has no price, that information is going to be this none variable, or non-valued variable. So if we've run temp, and we're at temp equals get price of yes.com, yes.com is not available, you can see it returns nothing, which is perfect. So if I just check that, we're good, basically. So now we can interpret. Now we know that either the output of get price is a string or a none typed variable, and we can interpret that how we choose. which is, you know, available, not available. Yeah. So the last part here is really just wrapping it up, you know, to be able to iterate over all domains and to extract the value of this, of get price, and to store it. It's really the last part of the price checking aspect. There is a last element of saving it again, which we kind of already have done with Write Mongo. I anticipate it will be different because we are not overwriting, we're not inserting new documents, we are amending documents, we are adding variables to documents. So you can see the iterative process in action, really. I'm trying to run the code to get price for all domains, but I'm throwing the wrong variable into the get price function, and as you can see, it's thrown a whole dictionary in, and obviously GoDaddy can't find that. It doesn't take long to be able to get to the what we want. And when we run that, we can't see the result. Pretty disappointingly, none of these domains have... Oh, one is available. Yeah, I was going to say none of them are available, but one is for a meager price of 130k. Small change, really. We can quickly see here that we have our desired functionality, really. Like, price is now a part of the dictionary, the nested dictionary, or rather, not even the nested dictionary, but the list of dictionaries, which is perfect. Going back to notes, we can now get back to our lovely and tried and tested psychological tool, mental hack to type done on all of our last objectives, or at least look forward to typing done because we are not done yet. What are some questions that you guys will have from this kind of project? It's a bit annoying that this isn't live. Then I could probably answer and discuss and go through my way of coding as I do it, which is probably more interesting. However, this is in the past, and I actually had no intention on Friday of actually making this a YouTube video. I woke up on Saturday and I thought, you know what, why not? Literally, why not? One of the questions I have is whether this kind of work is easier in another language. I actually only know Python. I don't have a computer science background. Again, I'm self-taught, like many of you are. I learned at work, a job that I had in finance in London. I quit my job and decided to spend a bit of time skilling up, really. I went down the route of, should I do a master's? Should I do these online courses? How should I learn? And I honestly had analysis paralysis for a little while. I then realized that really you learn best if there's some kind of emotional attachment to what you are learning. It's no surprise that the memories that you have, or rather the strongest memories you have, are of emotional experiences. So how can you make coding emotional? I don't suggest, torturing yourself while coding, or I don't know, doing push-ups while coding, but I do suggest finding projects that you're passionate about, or at least causes you're passionate about, and working on creating / building something that will progress you in understanding or satisfy you in some way in your chosen domain. Me personally, being told a capstone project or told to answer a set of exercises, yes, it might make me aware of the things that I need to learn, but really it doesn't come from me. And if it doesn't come from me, I'm not going to have that emotional attachment to it. I know that in advance, and because of that, I won't remember it. It won't be as useful for me. I think one of the biggest life hacks that exist is passion. If you are passionate about something, you do not need motivation. I see a lot of videos on YouTube about motivation, and I used to watch them, and I used to read books, self-help, you could call it, the category. I then realized that if you are passionate about something, if you have passion for something, if you are curious about it really, and you have ideas and desires to understand, to create, to improve, to break down things that happen in the real world, or it doesn't even have to be in the real world, it can be in any subject or any subdomain, then motivation isn't a question. I really think people need to tap into that more, and I think the way to do that is to rid yourself of expectation, or rather societal expectation, and to not worry about what other people think of certain things. A particular example of this is in a CV. Don't give a fuck about a CV. Really, it doesn't matter. If you are passionate about something, you will learn what it takes to build something, and any employer will be lucky to have someone like that. It's a dying trait, being passionate about things. And I think one of the things that kill it is the desire to fit into society. And without being too philosophical here, we are all individuals, and different things appeal to different people, and that's a great thing. You don't need to fit into a mold in order to join a company, and if you feel like you do, and if that's what they expect, that company is not for you, and that's fine. No one really cares about which company you work for, and if they do, they're not really the right people to be hanging around with, in my opinion. I think one of the things in this life is to be skillful in things, and skills are learned and lost. The mindset behind skills is not learned and lost. The mindset behind skills is always a curious, passion-driven thing, that really is not really a core value, but it almost is. And if you have that, you will always be able to learn. I think one of the things that people do after 21 or 22 or whenever you finish school, university, is to stop this mentality of learning and switch it to a mentality of earning. And when you switch that, when you make that mental switch, you feel like you're regressing when you decide to stop earning and to start learning again. And it's not just the difference between learning and earning, it's the motivation behind learning. If you're learning for a CV, if you're learning to put yourself back onto another job, to satisfy another societal expectation, it's a different source of motivation than when you're learning out of passion, out of genuine curiosity. I think it's also important to note that skills come and go. Skills are temporary, they change with technology, they change with fashion, they trend. So it's never really about the skill, it's more about using the skill as a tool to get to another destination, to get to where you want to be in terms of knowledge, in terms of understanding, in terms of impact. Anyway, rant over. Back to the work. The last part of the project, which is to update entries in the Mongo database. I have actually not done this before. The majority of tasks that I've done have just been a one-time dump of data that is not updated. So I first tried update, and sort of used the documents on mongo.com, mongodb.com, to try and figure out how to update. One of the things I like to do here is to add a counter and just to update the first 10. I mean, I have 2,000 documents in this particular collection. I don't really want to be experimenting with things I'm not sure about on that entire database for sort of computation reasons, and time reasons, really. So, you know, any issues that I come across in the first 10 will be representative of behavior across the entire 2,000. So it's always good to try and condense the sort of test environment this kind of is. So running this bit of code outside of a function, I can quickly see that, there's no real way to know what's going on, whether it's worked or not. I've added this little print at the bottom of the function, but I've already run it, so I could just check right now. So I think that's what I do. The worst thing in any function is for it to not behave like you want and for you to not know that. I think that was actually one of the biggest problems in writing code within a big company, especially as someone who wasn't trained as a computer scientist. I mean, I studied maths at university. I hated code at university only because I had no reason to use it. I mean, coding the Fibonacci sequence wasn't really fun for me because I had no application for it. At the time, I didn't really appreciate the beauty in what code could allow us to do. But in work, I did, because I could see how much of a time save it was. It wasn't really the code itself that I found beautiful. It was the capability of the code that I found beautiful. Obviously, that capability can also be a hindrance if you have to continue maintaining a bit of code, or also if it takes a long time to build that code, longer than a manual process. I mean, I'm always an advocate of spending more time initial upfront costs for sort of amortized gains over the long run as you continue to use the script. The script gets cheaper the more times you use it, really. So the upfront cost is really, in business terms, it's a great thing to do. But back to the point, having some kind of way of making sure that a script is running how you expect it is great. So here I just used old price. If the price within the document already exists, if the price field already exists, I want to know. So let's dump the old price, and let's not try and update the price if there exists an old price. You can decide to change this if you want. However, there's no real reason to re-update an old price, unless, I think you'd want a filter, or rather an indicator as to whether you want to update prices or not. A single pass of this function will just search every single domain and give you an answer for a price or not for every single domain. Rerunning it, I don't really want to have to create a driver, navigate to the page, try and find the XPath and dump it. That's a couple seconds at least. So we'll use this continue functionality to be able to move past documents that have a price field already. So what I'm looking at now is how actually to update the field, because I don't really know whether, or at this point, I didn't really know whether if I run this code and update, will it overwrite the entire contents of that document, or will it add any fields that are missing? So I found this $add fields argument on the .aggregate method. It looks promising. Let's see what happens. And then I came across this $set and hit the jackpot, basically. So it was immediately obvious that this was the right field to use. I dumped add fields and used set. Obviously making some dumb mistakes. $set is not a variable, so I do need to throw in a string. However, at this point in time, it's approaching midnight. The tea is wearing off. It takes me a little bit of time to realize, but that is life. Again, Stack Exchange, or Stack Overflow rather, game changer for me. I always felt when learning to code that at some point I'll just never have to use Stack Overflow and I'll never have to search for answers. It's not true. Like it's impossible to know the entire space of functions and coding principles and logic in coding. it's just not true. And to be honest, it's okay. It's totally fine to search for questions like this. If anything, it's better because it's at least coding is a field that encourages continual development. You know, you can never know everything about a language. You know, I mean, I've been using Python for, I'd say, 3 or 4 years now. 4 years now, and I wouldn't say I'm an expert. You know, like I know how to do the things that I've done before. I know just enough to do the projects that I want, or you know, that I have done. So, and I know no more. So I honestly do feel kind of dumb in Python, but it doesn't really matter. You know, I quite like the fact that there's a lot more to learn because it keeps me curious and it keeps me interested in code, really. If your automation is the new thing, or I mean, it has been the thing for a while, is there point learning to code? Like, yes, you can do the automation, but at some point, even code writing will be written by algorithms. So you could argue that, oh, here we go, finally discover that set has to be a string. You could argue that someone has to code the machine learning algorithms that will then learn themselves and teach themselves to code, or teach themselves to talk to computers, to talk to other systems in order to tell them what to do. But I think that kind of job is going to be reserved for a very specialist type of programmer, not the automation engineer or the sort of the side hustler. But maybe we're a while off from that. Maybe we're 50 or 100 years. Maybe not 100 years. Maybe we're, you know, in the magnitude of tens of years. So what I'm doing now is I realized that I overwrote some of the first 10 documents in the collection. So I'm just dumping the whole collection and having another go. What I could have done is just tend to the first 10 posts that I amended, but I thought, screw it, let me just delete it and see how the whole thing works. Or rather to just rebuild the database. At this stage, we have everything we need to finish the project. The first section contains a set of functions that allow us to navigate to a website, to scrape the names of this website, and to dump the resulting structured dictionary into a Mongo database. The second part independently loads from this database, constructs URLs from the contents of the database, and fetches prices. Putting those two together, it's a simple one-time code run that allows us to update all the entries of the original database with a price. If you have ideas and suggestions on further extensions of this project, definitely comment in the section below. Reach out to me if you feel like it. Work on the project yourself, build your own extension, whatever you want. The motivation for this project was a conversation, or rather a set of conversations I had with my flatmate we just discuss business ideas and project names, and with any kind of idea, you do need a name. And um, the girls' names is just an example, but you can easily become invested, as we kind of discussed at the beginning of this. You can easily become invested in the name that you think, this is a great name, but if the domain's gone, it's a bummer. It really is a bummer. And I don't know, but I wouldn't say I'm the most creative person, and so spending time coming up with a name is like quite a challenging thing for me. And so this, I think, makes it easier because it narrows down the set of names to given the parameters, or given the constraints of your budget and availability. At the same time, out of interest, you can see the most expensive domains. So even if you don't want to come up with names for projects or whatever, and you're just interested in like expensive names, then this also works. So as we can see, the output in the console is pretty messy. I don't really want to see all that, to be honest. So spend last little bit of time making it pretty, printing off certain things that I think will be useful. Just an indication that you actually which domain you're pricing, the actual price it finds. One of the things I missed out is a like sort of a progress bar, which in hindsight would have been great, but yeah, I just didn't do that this time. So here we go. I mean, it is working, which is great. Again, I'm still using the first 10 documents in the collection. So having wrapped everything, not everything, but having wrapped that last part into a function called enrich price, we run it, and yeah, it seems to be working. One thing that's missing is which domain that it's working on. It's really cosmetic. It's not. It doesn't really affect the workings of this function. However, it's just quite nice to see it if you are watching over it, or if you want to output this as a log at some point, then you want to know. Without this information, without knowing which domain it's looking at, it's hard to know where the error. Actually, it's almost impossible. It is impossible to know where the error is. So here now you can see Sophia.com old price. It doesn't have an old price. New price is obviously still none. So what I've chosen to do here is to, even if it has an old price, just to overwrite. And you can see that in line 71. Try print the old price, but don't actually amend don't actually continue to the next document. Stick with the same document and calculate price, and and update the collection, the document rather, in the collection with this new price that you found, which is also printed. So as we get past 10, we see that line 72 is not triggered, and the exception is, which is pricing. So since it doesn't have any old prices, you can see that it's pricing for the first time, and pretty sad, but not many of these prices are available, which is also good to know. So yeah, just further on that particular point of updating, I've just added an indicator function to tell the function to move on if we don't want to update. So if it does find an old price, then just continue. So looking over, we can go back to notes and write done on everything. Obviously very important to write done everywhere. Done. Feel much better afterwards. And the one part I missed from this project was actually to present the data. And there are many ways you can do it, you can use projects like this to learn data visualization tools, or business intelligence tools, Tableau, Google Data Studio, whatever else you want to use, or you can just keep it within the the console, like the console or the IDE that you're looking at. Ideally, you wouldn't be running the script in the console. You'd be running it in the command line, and so you wouldn't really be able to explore the database in that command line as you can in a script in an IDE. So it does suit throwing the entire Mongo database into, I don't know, a Tableau table view. I don't really use Tableau, so yeah, but if you do, then you probably know how to do that. Or at least it's a suggestion to learn how to do that. One of the things you can also do is wrap the entire part 1 and part 2 into a class or an object. Yeah, looking back at this, it's obvious I've made a massive mistake. Def underscore underscore init underscore underscore open brackets SEL. Yeah, but this is not going to work. Certain things you don't really need within the class. Like when I first started using classes, I kind of just threw everything related to that bit of work inside the class object, and I thought that was great at first because it just, you know, enclosed everything in one area, one part of the script. However, when it comes down to, you know, playing around with that object, you just have too many methods, and I hate having too many methods. It just makes it. I just don't like the aesthetic of that. It's also not practical if you are writing an object for someone else. You know, you want to make it as simple as possible. If the object is for something simple like this, then keep it simple. Like don't overcomplicate things by throwing in all the helper functions into the object. So helper functions here. Anything to do with the driver, you know, it's not specifically for baby curl scraping. You know, it's just a general thing. So let's keep it separate. It's really bugging me that I didn't fix that the self part of the scraper, and it's pretty crazy that I haven't seen it. Still, you know, I'm just going about my day, removing open brackets and removing square brackets, living without a care. Hey, there we go. So really chopping down the scraper class just to 2 core functions or methods within that class, which is scrape and build document, because really that's all we're doing here, right? We're given a URL to scrape, and then building documents from that, from the results. So just rewriting what we have here. I've chosen not to keep the raw scrape data within the class. I quite like that to be outside the class. I think if you were to create other classes that do other things with the raw data, then it's quite nice to have it outside. That said, having it inside also works. Again, write Mongo is a helper function, really. It's outside of the class. It's not within the baby girl scraper class. So the nice thing about not containing variables within a class is simplicity. Again, the only three things that would be available, if someone else was to run this object, would be the three variables I've just defined. And finally, the last thing would be the full list dictionary of domains. So just 4 things within this small class. It's pretty contained. I'm a fan, if I say so myself. This last part of the video is just sort of, it's not sort of, it is adding some comments to what each part of the script does, wrapping the second part of the project into a second class, and just sort of just wrapping up, really, enjoying life at midnight. 12:22, pretty short project, quite nice. I think while doing this kind of thing, there's no real right answer on how to do this. You can have a look on GitHub at how people structure their projects, and you'll see a lot of variation in how they comment, how they notate things. But what I would say is not to really worry about it too much, and look out for nicer ways to lay out your code. And nicer doesn't necessarily mean most efficient. You know, you may want to keep for loops in if efficiency of code isn't really relevant, then readability might be more relevant. And you know, if you're writing code for others, or you're writing code that code that other people will use and may have to debug or may have to amend, then for loops may not be a bad thing at all. In every case, annotating code is good practice. Here, I probably haven't annotated as much as I should do, but that wasn't really the purpose of this project. No one else is really using this, so I don't mind too much. If someone else was going to be using this, then I would definitely at least add comments to each class and maybe write a little bit more about the helper functions and how to use them. So here I'm really deliberating whether to contain the driver in the baby girl pricer object. Why would you do this? You would do this if you wanted to have a way to keep control of the driver, you know, storing it as an instance of a driver within object means that anytime you call the object, you'll have access to the driver. It can easily be lost. You could wrap it, if you wrap it up without, if you wrap it up inside a function, you can easily start it and not be able to kill it later on, just because you have no way of accessing that driver. And how that would look would be, you'd have a Chrome browser open up, controlled by your function ends, and the browser is still there. You don't want to have that process running on your machine. In case for some reason there's an error in your function and it doesn't finish, then at least storing it as a variable within Baby Girl Pricer, you're able to call it at a later stage, and kill it at a later stage, more importantly. So yeah, that is. I decided that was preferable. That was preferable behavior. Sort of wrapping it up now. It's been kind of too long. It's a fun little project. I do wait to see how long this thing takes, but there are 2,000 names or domains to search, and we declare a waiting time of 2 seconds. So each iteration is going to take more than 2 seconds. So as a low estimate, it's 2 seconds or 2,000, it's 4,000 seconds. It's a good 70 minutes, almost 70 minutes. Yeah. So I'm not expecting it to be finished soon. I will forward this part of the video, just because I think it's taking the piss if I make you watch 70 minutes of the code scraping data. I mean, yeah. I'm here to show you something interesting, not to torture you. But overall, yeah, like that. This is the type of thing that you'd have to go through. The decorating, I call this part decorating, adding prints to different parts of the script. Some overdoing it is a bit messy, and I try not to do that, but I would like to be able to have a look, come back and have a look and be able to make sense of what the script is doing midway through. So doing this kind of thing is really beneficial. The other thing is, if you write many scripts, you come back to it at a later stage, you run it, and you don't know why it's going wrong. It's just a nightmare to debug, and it's a nightmare to kind of remember, especially if, you come back after a year. Most likely, GoDaddy will have changed the shape of their site, structure of their site, and it's not going to work. Which is the big problem with scraping, to be honest, but that's just how it is. There's no API with GoDaddy, or at least I haven't used one. So, yeah, you can't expect this to work all the time. You have to expect to correct and improve code over time. And with that in mind, you want to make it as easy to jump back into as possible for yourself, if not for anyone else. So the last part is to fast forward through to the end of the script so you can actually see the results. This is boring, so I'm just gonna stop talking and fast forward. So finally that's done, and we can explore the dataset really. So we try and load the Mongo database, and quickly see that, great, there are 2,000 documents within Baby Girl collection. If we try to find those documents, we'll be able to extract the information we want and have a look at what we found. So remembering the structure of the Mongo database object, we'll have to iterate over documents within the collection. Doing that, we'll be able to dump out all the information. I quite like to use pandas DataFrame for interpreting data sets. It's not always the best thing to use, however, in this case, when you only have 2,000 rows, it's perfect. So doing that, we can see we can just throw everything into a data frame. So just a table, really. What we care about is having a look at these prices. So if we do some ad hoc analysis, quickly sorting it by price, we can see some values. The problem by sorting with price is that price is still a string. So we're actually not sorting on the value of the number. We're sorting on the alphanumeric, the order of the string, or rather the order of the alphabets within the string. what I'm trying to do here is strip out the variables strip out the rows that don't have a price in my typically trial and error fashion approach to coding. Subsetting and using pandas data frames is pretty fun. It's a pretty simple thing to do if you can get it right. After some iteration, trying is null gives you the satisfactory conditions in order to strip out prices that do not exist. And it's just a simple case of including the right character to exclude rather than include the subset. So doing that, we get a subset of 300 rows out of 2000, which is pretty low. Quite interesting. Imagine searching through all those domains by hand, only for 300 out of 2000 to be there. I think we've definitely saved a lot of time by doing this in code. So it's obvious now that the string price is not ideal. It doesn't really give us much information. Pandas doesn't interpret that as a number yet. So the next thing to do would be to change the type of this variable. I think there are many ways to do this actually, but I couldn't really remember at the time, so I think I did have to Google, which is a bit embarrassing, but my excuse is that it was 2 a.m. 2:17 a.m. on a Saturday, Saturday morning. It was a big night. after reformatting the price values from string to float and filtering out non-prices, we can sort the final database, the DataFrame in fact, and view the 300 rows in price order, lowest to largest. We can see Bailey.com as the cheapest, £15.42, and Cassandra.com as the most expensive, 617k sterling. Wow, that is impressive, but still available. So if you have that and don't want to buy a house, then there you go, Cassandra.com. One mistake I noticed with the initial running of the script, the price checking aspect of the script, was that Dixie.ai had reported a none price or could not find a price on GoDaddy.com. However, a simple search on the link shows it is available at £81.99. So the initial assumption I made earlier that if that certain xpath field was not available, there is no price, was incorrect. It turns out that premium domains and regular domains are treated differently. Therefore, I had a little bit of extra work to do in cleaning up the scripts, removing the initialization functions in the classes, and also rerunning the code with a slightly different xpath value, or string rather, in order to pick up the prices that were missed the first time around. This type of work was slightly different to the code we've written before, but really all it was updating the values of every single price, basically. I could have picked the keys that had a none price specifically, but there were 1,700 out of 2,000, so it was easier just to rerun the whole entire list of domains. So the way to fix this kind of issue is to repeat the process of finding the xpath that we have done previously in a trial and error sort of fashion. After making that change in the final getPrice function, all that's left is to rerun the entire analysis on the full set of domains. It's pretty boring, I won't make you watch it, so I will fast forward 100x. Coming out the other side, you can immediately see there are some new prices. Dixie.ai has been updated to £81.99. Loading the Mongo database in the same fashion we did earlier and applying the same set of transformations we did earlier, we can now see 587 rows are completed with a price as opposed to 300 before, almost doubling that number. And sorting it again doesn't change the minimum and maximum prices. However, we have a set of domains actually all ending in .ai that are 81.99. That really summarizes the project here. It took a couple of hours, just more than a couple of hours actually, maybe 3 hours of actual coding and an hour to an hour and a half of code runtime. But the point was to show the entire process from start to finish, a note-taking aspect of the project, as well as error handling and a largely trial and error based approach to these projects. I think quite a lot of videos only really upload the correct aspects of project building, and the reality is that you often do have mistakes and you often do need to search new ways and optimal ways of doing things. We are done.